All right, engineers, welcome to the lesson you've all been waiting for, the lesson where we turn our 2D sketches into 3D objects. So this process that we're going to be doing today is called extruding. And like I said, it's the process of taking our two-dimensional sketches and bringing them out into the third dimension. So it's just one of the tools that we're going to learn for going from our 2D sketches to final objects. So let's go ahead and get started. Today in our demo, we're actually going to be doing this cube. So we're going to be starting with this, learning how to use the extrude tool. Then we're going to be building a little cube structure, some things added on and taken out of our cube. And then we're going to finish up by making this little temple keychain. So if any of you are thinking about temple for school, maybe this is a little keychain that you would want to print yourself out, put your dorm key on, put your other keys on, and things like that. All right, so let's go ahead and get started by first creating a new document in OnShape. And we're going to go ahead and use the proper naming convention. So it is your class name underscore. This is the extrude demo. And then your last name. So make sure you follow that proper naming convention so that when you submit your document, it gets submitted in the right spot. All right, so we are going to start like we usually start by going to the top plane and hiding our front and our right planes. And then we are going to have multiple part studios, so we're going to go ahead and rename this part studio so that we know which tab has which parts. So we'll right click, rename, and we will call this the cube. And then for this assembly tab, we don't actually need this right now. We're not going to be putting any of our parts together for a little while. We still have to learn all of the different tools that we can use to create our 3D objects. So we'll go ahead and right click on that and delete that tab so we don't have to worry about that. So we should be back on our cube tab, have that renamed. Right now we don't have any sketches, but we are going to start by creating a sketch. So we'll create that on the top plane like we usually do. We're going to do a center point square. So it's either, or sorry, a center point rectangle. So it's either R on your keyboard, or you can click the drop down and choose a center point rectangle. And then we can build it out however we want, but we're going to set the dimensions. So it's either D on your keyboard, or you can click the dimension tool. We'll start by dimensioning the top. We'll make it 40 millimeters. And then we could dimension the side, but there's an easy constraint that we can use that will prevent us from having to type in the 40. So it's called the equals constraint. If you go to your constraints, click on our drop down, it's the equal constraint. You can also just use the E on the keyboard. And then all you have to do is just click on the side that you've dimensioned, the side that you want to dimension, and then they set it equal to each other. So this is 40, now this is 40, and we have a perfect square. Okay, so remember, press escape to get out of any of your tools. And so now we have our sketch that we want to bring into the third dimension. So now we're actually going to be using the extrude tool. So to do that, you have to click on an area that you want, or if you want an entire sketch, you can click on the whole sketch. So before we can do that, we do need to confirm the sketch. And then you'll see that we can click on the area. So if I click on the space right here, you'll see it turns orange. This is what I want to bring into the third dimension. So I'm going to click on extrude, and you'll see that this pops up. Now, you get this extrude menu here, and this is what we're going to learn about today. There are lots of different options here. You can see that there's a whole bunch of things going on. We're going to go through the things that we're going to be using for this. So the first thing I want you to notice is that the depth here determines how high or low your extrude goes. So we can either bring it up or down, or if we want to set it exact, we can just type it in here. So if I want a cube, which is a three-dimensional object that has all the same length, width, and height, we're going to go ahead and make this a 40 millimeter depth because my length and width were 40. So there's our depth there. That's our cube. But there's some other things that we could do. So you can see this option down here, symmetric. So what the symmetric option does is it actually extrudes out in both directions. So you can see, like, obviously this is only going up in one direction. If I wanted it to go half up and half down, I would choose symmetric, and you can see that it extrudes then 20 going up and 20 going down. And that could be useful when you're creating new planes, adding things to different objects. Won't be useful for a little while, but just know that that's what that is. So we can turn the symmetric option off, and then it goes back up there. One other thing that I want to look at here is the direction. So right now, this is extruding up. If we click on this arrow, it'll switch to the opposite direction. So sometimes, for some different reasons, OnShape will change the direction, and you'll just have to click on the arrow and move it around, especially when you're trying to, like, put holes in things or remove things. So there we go. Now, one other thing that we're going to learn, or we're going to look at in this one, is this new versus add option. So when you are creating these 3D objects, you have the option to add on to an existing object or create a new object or create a new part. So right now, obviously, we don't have any parts that exist in here. This is the first thing that we put in. So the only option that we have is new. But if we were to do another sketch on top of this, we would have the option of either adding or doing it new, and we'll look at that in the next little demo. All right, so go ahead and confirm that so you have a nice little cube, and then we're going to move on to create a new part studio where we're going to do that second part. So click on the add button here, and then create part studio. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is rename this part studio. So right click and rename, and then we're going to name this one Sketch on Cube, because that's exactly what we're going to be doing. We're going to be creating that exact same cube, and then we're going to be putting a sketch on top of that. So to create that same cube, top, hide the front, hide the right, create a sketch on the top plane, center point rectangle, make sure you're in the center there. Bring it out, dimension, 40, and then the equals constraint. So now we have our sketch created. Confirm that, and then we'll extrude, and we'll choose this section to extrude, and we'll make that 40. So confirm that extrude, and this is exactly where we were in our first sketch. So what are we going to do now? Well, I'm going to show you that you can actually extrude or you can remove from an existing object, okay? And so now you can get into more details. We can do this on any surface if we wanted to. We could do this here, we could do this down here, any surface we want, and that would allow us to do it. So if we're looking at this, we actually want to create, like it says here, a sketch on this cube. So we'll go to the top surface, but really we're not going to be sketching on the top plane. We're now going to be sketching on the surface of this cube. So when we create a new sketch, it asks us what sketch plane. We're not clicking on top, we're clicking on the cube itself. And you'll see it says the face of extrude 1. So if it does not say the face of extrude 1, then you're not doing this correctly. We want to be sketching on the cube itself, okay? And so now that we have the sketch plane created on here, we're just going to do a couple lines. So we're going to choose the line tool. I want to make a line right down the middle. Make sure that it's exactly in the middle, and then escape to get out of that. Go back to the line tool. We'll do one more going across, again exactly in half. You know that when those yellow boxes pop up, that you're in exactly the half, and escape that. And now I have my sketch that I want there, so I'll confirm that. And if you notice, that sketch is not on the top plane. The sketch itself is actually on the face of this cube. And so now I have some different regions that I can do things with. So if I wanted to maybe bring this up and, a little bit higher and leave these down, then I could do an extrude for just this part. So if I have this part clicked on, I can click on extrude. And then notice how it defaults to add. So it wants to add on to this existing object, okay? If I wanted to create this as a completely new shape, so a completely new part, I could do new, and you'll see that it changes colors because it's a new part. And the issue with that is if you're trying to 3D print things that are two parts, the slicer software gets confused because it's like, wait a minute, are these supposed to be connected? Are they not? So unless you really want them to be two parts, and you would actually print them out in two parts and then put them together by hand, you want to choose add as your option there. Okay, so we'll go ahead and extrude that up another 20. So we'll make that up just a little bit higher, and we'll confirm that one. So notice how we have this part up a little bit higher than these other parts because I just extruded that sketch on the face there. Now, I want to do this other corner and I want to move it down, but notice my sketch went away. It didn't actually go away, it's just hidden. So if I want to be able to see it again, I can show my sketch, and then I can see that I have these other three regions. So if I want to move this down, I can choose one of the other extruding options, which is actually not bringing it out, it's actually removing. So I don't want to add. We get some errors when we try to add here. So we don't want to do that, but what we do want to do is we want to remove. So when I go remove, you can see that it takes away a certain distance, and that certain distance is the depth. So if I change this depth to be 20, you can see that it'll go down just a little bit less. And if I can move this up and down, obviously it changes it on there, but I want it to be 20. Now, if for some reason your OnShape is weird, maybe it'll do this, and obviously you can't remove if there's nothing to remove from, so you get these errors. So if you have something that happens like that when you're trying to do a remove, just change your direction, and that should fix it. But you should not have any red. It should all be, blue and yellow. If you have red, that means that there's some problem going on. Okay, so that is remove, that is new, and that is add. We will get to intersect eventually, but that is not something that we'll need for a little while. So we can go ahead and confirm this extrude 3, and we can move on to the final little project we're going to do, which is that temple keychain. So we'll add one final part studio, and we will start by renaming this part studio temple keychain. Alright, so this is a very rough idea of the keychain that I want. So I think this is a pretty good size. It's about 40 millimeters in width and about 45 millimeters in height. And then I want about 5 millimeters of thickness. So not too big, something like I put my keychain on. I also want, obviously, a ring so that it'll fit on my keychain. And then I want my temple logo to fill up most of that space. So this is the goal, kind of our little blueprint, our drawing, our sketch. If you can think about the engineering design process, it's a step before we actually start to create. But now I know what I'm going to be creating. So again, we want 40 millimeters here, 45 on the height, and then if we're thinking about these curved edges, we're going to need to do some filleting on the edges to do that. So let's go ahead and get into OnShape to create this. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I definitely am not much of an artist, and I could not come up with a temple logo by myself. But as we know, and we learned in previous lessons, we can just trace. So we're going to go ahead and download this temple image. You're going to find it in Google Classroom, download it, and then remember to upload or to insert an image, we first need to import it. So we'll do add, import. Then you'll need to find it. It'll probably be in your downloads. It's uploaded. Then we can create a new sketch on the top plane, and we will insert the image. Select the image, and we'll draw it. Okay. So now that you have this image inserted, we're going to go ahead and actually dimension it because we know how big we want the keychain to be. And you can kind of think like if we curve these edges off a little bit, that would be pretty much the keychain we want. And then we can put the hole in it down here, and that's it. So we'll set this picture to be the dimensions we want so that when we trace it, it's already the dimensions we want. We'll go ahead and dimension the top here. I want this to be 40. And notice how it auto dimensions the height here because this doesn't want to get distorted, or OnShape doesn't want to distort the picture. So this should be right about 45. And we'll leave that right there. Okay, now, a good practice is to actually name all your sketches so you know what they are. We are going to go and eventually delete this picture. So we want to make sure we're not accidentally deleting a sketch or like our tracing. So we'll rename this the picture, and then we can confirm that. So now the picture's in our background, and we can do our tracing to create the sketch, which then we can actually extrude. So we'll do a new sketch, and we'll do it on the top plane. So make sure you're clicking on the top plane there. You should see sketch 1 top plane. And we will call this keychain sketch, because this is actually the sketch that we're going to extrude to make the keychain itself. So we've typed in the name, we've got our name, we've got our picture imported, and now we're going to start by actually tracing this temple outline. Now, it might be kind of difficult to have this temple logo with the origin right here. We actually haven't hit our front or our right planes yet, so we got to do that. So what I think I'm going to do, and you should do this as well, is go into your sketch, your picture, and move this so that the origin is on one corner. And then you can zoom in and zoom out to be able to get that in focus there. But I think that'll make it a lot easier. That origin tends to be an auto constraint that really gets in our way. So moving it to the corner there, that'll really help get it out of the way. Okay, so now let's go back to our keychain sketch, and now we can do the corner rectangle. So again, it's the corner rectangle, not the center point rectangle. And we will start in the top corner. We're going to get these auto constraints that we don't want. So we'll go ahead and hold shift. If you move off and hold shift, notice when you move back over it, those auto constraints don't pop up. So just make sure that you are in the top corner there, and then we can go down and across, and there we go. And if we want to set our dimensions exact, if we want this to be 40 exact, we can do that. And we can actually make this 45, and there we go. Now, if we want to center our rectangle kind of where the temple's in the middle, it looks pretty good. But if we need to move it at all, you can move that rectangle around so that it's more centered. But I think that looks pretty good to me. We're going to end up doing the keychain hole right over here, so we have plenty of space for that. So I think we can get into actually tracing the T now. Now, if you notice, these are all straight lines. So if you were thinking about using the spline tool, that would not be a great idea. I think the best idea would be to use the line tool, and then it's kind of perfect where a lot of these edges line up. So we can use some horizontal constraints, some vertical constraints, and we can get some pretty good lines here. So let's go ahead and start tracing. I would start in one of the corners and go ahead and do your thing. Notice how the horizontal constraint pops up. Make sure we're locked in horizontally and vertically. Top part is done. And we'll start with the horizontal constraint. Make sure that we are level there. All right, second part done. All right, third part done. And for the last one. All right, we are all finished with tracing our temple, actual what we want here. So we'll go ahead and confirm our keychain sketch. And notice how you can still see the picture in the background there, and that's because it's still there, right? We still have the picture sketch. So we don't need the picture anymore. We've done the tracing that we need to do. So we can go ahead and delete the picture. And when we delete the picture, we should just see our temple logo traced, and that's our sketch. And we're going to turn this into that three-dimensional keychain here in just a second. Now, if you did have any red on here, just make sure there's like a constraint that's red. Just go ahead and delete that. But it should be all good, and we confirm that. We can see that there's some different regions that we can extrude. Now, if you remember from the very beginning of the video when I showed you the keychain, it actually had curved edges. So right now we have these sharp edges, and if you remember, we can actually change that by just doing the sketch fillet. So if we go into our sketch one more time, and we choose fillet, we can smooth these things out before we do the extrude. We could do it after, but it's easier if we just do it before. The radius should be 5 millimeters, so make sure it's 5 millimeters there. Confirm, and then now we can confirm that sketch. Okay, so now we have our smooth corners, we have our temple logo, and so we're going to click on the region that we actually want to bring out. Remember, the temple part that was white was actually cut out. So this part that I just clicked is the part that's going to end up being red, and is the part that's going to be extruded. So we click on that region, we choose extrude, and then you can see it comes out, and we want to make it 5 millimeters, new, and adding on, going out. So it should look like this right here. Okay, so we can go ahead and confirm that extrude, because that's what we want. And that looks pretty cool, except remember, Temple, their logo's red, it's not blue. If you remember, my keychain was actually red. So if we want to change the appearance, change the color, we can easily do that. If you just right click, there's an option that says edit appearance for part 1, and we can change that to our nice temple red. Cool, so we're almost finished making this keychain. The last thing we need to do is actually put in the hole where it's going to go, through the keychain itself. So to do that, we're going to create a sketch on top of our keychain. So we'll make sure that we're looking at the top of it here. We'll create a new sketch. We're going to choose this surface. So click on this surface. It should say the face of extrude 1. And then we're just going to create a center point circle. And we're going to do that in the corner where we want it to be. So about right here. And I think 3 millimeters is pretty good. We'll set the dimension to be 3 millimeters so that it'll fit around the keychain. And then we'll rename this keychain hole. Go ahead and confirm that. And so to turn this sketch into a hole, we need to click on that region, do an extrude, but this time it's not an add. We don't want to add on. That would be weird. Not good for a keychain. We want to do a remove. And because it's going all the way through, it doesn't matter. I mean, the minimum distance we could do would be 5 millimeters. If we only did 2 millimeters, it wouldn't go all the way through. So we wouldn't be able to put our keychain through. So it needs to be at least 5. Make it 6 just to be sure. It doesn't matter if we go even further. And then we can confirm that. And so now if we look at our temple keychain, it is actually something that this is a file we could take to a slicer, put on the 3D printer, and have printed out and ready to go. No problem at all. So we will see you guys in the next video. Good luck with this, and excited to get into actual 3D printing.